You're listening to another Everything's Political podcast. I actually have a real politician in this time around. I'm your host, Zeena, as you know, and we have Louis Abramson, who is running for California State Assembly.
Indeed.
Doesn't that sound so fancy? But you're actually doing the Lord's work, in my opinion. We're going to get into the nitty gritty of state assemblies, California, how you got here. But you were first a scientist. Tell us about your journey.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Zeena, for inviting me. I am a trained astrophysicist. So I have spent the last... I went to college in New York, and I did a physics degree there. And I basically was on an academic trajectory until, like, August, when I fully committed to politics. I moved to California, actually, because... it's the center of astronomy kind of in the U.S. Like UCLA.
Is it really?
Yeah.
That I did not even know.
Yeah. L.A. is sort of one of, a handful of real centers of mass, to pardon the pun, of astrophysics in the U.S. And it's a combination of Caltech in Pasadena, JPL in Pasadena, UCLA here. We're very close by to UC Santa Barbara, UC San Diego, UC Riverside. So all taken together, this is just like really one of the most amazing places to do astronomy, to study astronomy in the world. And actually, there are deep political connections here because a lot of it has to do with the in-flight of a bunch of white Midwesterners from Chicago, which is where I did graduate school, to here.
And the money sticks together. For
yeah,
sure.
and the land use patterns stick together. But anyway, so I came back here to become a professor of astrophysics, and I landed at UCLA in 2015. And the furthest west I could afford to live was Hollywood. So that's where I rented. And a year later, Trump won an election. And I think, like many people, I decided, hey, maybe dedicating 100% of my brain to light that was emitted before the Earth existed was not the best thing I could do with my time. And so I decided to sort of get more involved in politics in a real way then. And I started gradually, I canvassed for a congressional candidate, Katie Hill, who many may remember, up in Palmdale and Lancaster in the desert. And that was the first time I'd gone door to door, and I fell in love with it. And so
in the desert. So you went door to door in the desert.
Yeah, it's wild, but it is great. It is tremendous. I have a real soft spot for folks up in the high desert. And then we brought it. We won that election, and I came back to LA and started looking around and seeing the homelessness and the housing affordability issues in my neighborhood. And I decided I have to get more involved. And as an academic, we have a lot of freedom with our time. So it was very easy to start going to meetings, and I even ran for a very local office in my neighborhood and won. And talked
City council,
neighborhood council,
Ooh.
Which we can talk about later.
Yes, you have to outline all the nuances for us because local politics.
It's part of the complexities of LA governance specifically, which are myriad. But anyway, and so after 3 years of doing that and working with some seniors during the pandemic, I decided that if I really want to make the change in my neighborhood, I have to run for a state office, a state legislative office. And I was fortunate in that my state assembly person was retiring. And so now I'm here.
Absolutely. Okay. A lot there. Let's dig in. First of all, you brought up something that I think is pretty interesting and something that a lot of people don't think about California, right? That there are all of these industries, and I know that, astrophysics, you know, and other financial kind of like streams that are bringing in a real myriad of people, right? To the city, to the county. How did you find that transition? Like when you decided to make that commitment, like what was the catalyst to that decision?
Well, I mean, answering the first part of the question first, like the transition itself has been much easier than I expected. I mean, I think moving from science to politics, it's a lot of the same, at least in campaigning, it's a lot of the same brain cells. Like there's a lot of planning, there's a lot of modeling, there's a lot of the same thinking that I do as a scientist. Like my science brain has been active the whole time on the campaign trail. So in terms of like my day-to-day thinking, it's been smooth. And also I was very well supported by my colleagues in science. I mean, everybody is terrified of the direction that the federal government was going when Trump won. We were scared science budgets were going to get cut. Climate change is obviously paramount of a concern to scientists. We were afraid that was going to get thrown out the window. So I would say, we remember the Science March. There was a real awakening amongst the academic community when Trump won, that made me not take this step alone. So I've been very well supported by all of my colleagues who totally understand where I'm going. The catalyst beyond Trump, so that Trump is sort of like the distant factor, but the most proximate one is just with my deputy campaign manager Helen and my campaign manager Brian Cohan, like we have spent the past 3 years as volunteers doing outreach to unhoused people in the encampments, as part of a volunteer group called Zeena, which works throughout LA. And I just 1 in 30 people in my neighborhood live on the street, and that's unacceptable.
Rampant in that area.
It's unacceptable. And I know their names. I know their stories. I've helped far too many of them get from the street into some kind of home, including a mother, an autistic mother with a 3-month-old baby, and an honorably discharged veteran who happened to be a Black trans woman. Like, these are the most, they're the people who need the most help from the government, and the government has just completely let them down. And I, to be frank, just got sick and tired of it, and figured somebody from my community, which has been more impacted than this by almost any other in California besides Skid Row downtown and maybe the Tenderloin in San Francisco, somebody from this community who has seen these problems that our government has failed to face close up needs to be in the discussion on what the government needs to do to be better at this. So.
And you saw it from the ground level.
Yeah.
Basically.
And I see it every day. It's not like it's gone away, right? Like, if you ever drive through homelessness, right next to the Walk of Fame, there are a bunch of people who, are being left to their just completely their own devices on the street. And, we have to do better than that.
No, absolutely. And actually, sorry, the point that I wanted to bring up was that a lot of people think of LA, Hollywood as this flashy,
Right.
truly like industry Hollywood piece. But when you go to Hollywood, and I think a lot of people will comment on this, I'll have friends comment like, oh, it's not what I thought it was. Right. And there is a true community between people who have historically been there, who are getting priced out by a lot of these things that are happening, and the financial inflation that has been happening across the board, especially in the real estate sector. Like, forget it. It's insane here. But I think that that's such an interesting lens to look through it versus the traditional thought of what Hollywood actually is.
Yes. And that tension is real. I mean, we're like the world headquarters of Netflix. And right outside are, by last count in 2020, out of 19,000 people who live in the formerly designated neighborhood of Central Hollywood, 660 were unhoused. So that is almost as many as in the entire city of Santa Monica, which is 90,000 people.
It's insane.
We have half the population of the city of West Hollywood and are a little bit bigger than half the size, and we have 6 times as many unhoused people as in West Hollywood. So yes, my community is very deeply impacted, and it extends. That's what you see, but behind what you see is 10 times as many people who are paying half their income in rent. And so they're about to become homeless, right? And it's this, there's a lot of attention focused, rightfully so, on the part of the tragedy that is people living in tents on the sidewalk in the second largest city in the most economically powerful country on the planet. But what we don't see are the stories of people struggling to survive, sometimes living 5 or 6 people to a 1-bedroom when COVID hit, especially like in critical jobs, jobs that were deemed you have to keep going into work, i.e. low income service jobs, and they're people of color. And this confluence of housing affordability, intrinsic poverty, and the fact that the people who support our vibrant economies are more diverse than often the vibrant neighborhoods that they serve.
And treated the worst.
This is how we compound all of these social inequities, healthcare disparities, homelessness, overcrowding in homes, housing affordability, and then ultimately homelessness, and then ultimately mental health and drug issues. So this is the conversation we have to be having more of as a scientist. This is the part of the conversation that I really focus on, how all of our problems intersect and compound each other, and how we can therefore make progress on many fronts that are important to us by focusing on any of them. So.
I mean, that's a really interesting kind of dissection of the issue. But one thing that I've done, I've volunteered multiple times trying to bring food to the homeless. Yeah. I've volunteered at the food bank, right? Mm-hmm. But one volunteer event that I went to pretty recently in Koreatown, you had to actually go hand to hand and hand out food and kind of discuss with people like, what do you need? It was a little bit more interesting because I had kind of distanced myself. And I have so much respect for people who actually go in, learn stories. And I started to really hear some interesting themes, or just like see people who didn't even look homeless to me, who were actually living in these tents and living in those spaces. What's one of the most interesting situations, or probably sad to say, but like one of the more heartbreaking situations that you have encountered in your time volunteering?
One that strikes me right off the bat is so when, because this illustrates the intersection of a lot of problems like I just mentioned. So when COVID started, as part of the neighborhood council, we were struggling to figure out like how are we going to do outreach to the at-risk populations in our community, and one of the ones that sort of maximized our ability to actually reach them and also help were senior citizens. So I'm the chair of the outreach committee on my neighborhood council, and when I got elected, because again, it all comes back. Like when I was with Katie Hill, we knocked on a bunch of doors. And then when I ran my campaign for neighborhood council, I knocked on a bunch of doors. You
met people.
You need the voter file for that. And as a government agency, which the neighborhood councils are, we can get the voter file. And so we were one of the few elements of LA city government that could just call people, because we could do affirmative outreach to them, because anybody who registered to vote with a phone number, we could call. So we whipped together hundreds of volunteers, and we just called every single registered voter over 65 in 2 zip codes, starting on the 19th. And on day 2 of that effort, I called a person who I had him living at a home not too far from Bronson and Hollywood, the intersection. And I called him, and he said he was no longer there. He was living in a car around the corner.
Oh my God.
And he was living with his husband or partner, and they both had AIDS. And we were sitting with, at that time, this is like March 19th, 2020. Like, we thought, if you are immunocompromised and you step outside, you're going to die. So
no one knew.
Nobody knew. We knew that this virus definitely impacted acutely people who were immunocompromised. This was a senior citizen who had AIDS and had been pushed from his apartment to a car because he couldn't afford rent. And because of my work in the community up to that point, I could connect him to resources. Fortunately, he and his husband ended up moving into a hotel as part of Project Room Key, and then into permanent supportive housing. But I remember that call and just being like, I think that really knocked me down for the day. And actually, it was one of 2 homeless seniors who ended up calling, one of whom spoke Korean. And all of the government notices were being put out in English online. And it's like, these people did not have access to the internet, and I'm sure that there were translatable websites, but the one that comes up is English, and so they couldn't read the help that the government was giving them. It was up to volunteers to get together. I have Korean-speaking friends. You were in K-Town for All, may have been one of the groups you're working with. 2 of the people who I do homeless outreach and brought me into it.
I've heard of it, yeah.
Are native Korean speakers, so like I could call them and they could talk to this woman, but anyway, so that's a bad story. A little bit later in the pandemic, I was doing outreach in my community. It was a very hot day. I don't know if you remember, like August was like a heat wave in 2020. And so we were just going out to give water to folks in encampments in our neighborhood. And I came across a guy at the corner of Romaine and Mansfield he had been there for a while. He's an artist. He had like a lot of art supplies. And I walked over and he held up a sign to me. And I had met this guy before he could speak, and I walked over to him, and the sign was asking me to please call his case managers because his jaw had been broken 2 weeks ago. And I was the first person. This is an old black man, senior citizen. I had been the first person to find him after being assaulted 2 weeks prior.
2 weeks?
Had broken jaw for 2 weeks. He couldn't eat anything.
Did he tell you how it happened, or was he able to communicate that?
He had written it down that he had been assaulted, and but it wasn't like any witnesses were going to come forward to the cops.
Of course.
Again, because I had been engaged in my community, and this is a good reason to get engaged in your community, I had made the ties where I could call what we call E6 teams. Like, those are the teams that actually go out and do outreach professionally to unhoused people, and I could get the lead of one of those teams to make sure we could hurry this guy up into a hospital. But if I hadn't been out there happenstance looking for him, who knows what would have happened. So he hasn't been back since, so I'm hopeful he's been housed. But so those are 2. I mean, there's more. Like I said, like I met a mother and a daughter at Yucca and Las Palmas with with Helen. We were the ones who had to quarterback her movement into off the street into at least temporary shelter with her 3-month-old baby. She was in a situation where she was autistic, and her brother was with her, and her brother's girlfriend, and she depended on her brother because he was her SSI payee, but the brother's girlfriend didn't count as family. So they could move her and her brother and her baby into a special family shelter, but not with the brother's girlfriend, because this is how our systems are set up.
Ugh.
So we spent a long time trying to ultimately get her, into a stable place, and we did. But it's like the saddest thing. Those are just examples. I have
inhumane.
I'll just leave you with one more because I want to make it clear that like what you were talking about in terms of the diversity of the unhoused population and just. I have gotten calls when I've been on vacation in New Jersey, where my family lives, from unhoused people saying, hey, I have a pregnant woman here who's also on the street. I need help. What can I do for this person? And the only thing I can say is you got to call 211. You can sit on hold for an hour and nothing. And those calls break my heart, where it's a homeless person trying to help another homeless person. And that person, that in specific instance, as you say, because many unhoused people do have jobs. He was able to pay for a night in a motel for those folks, but I mean, I don't know what happened.
But they're on the fringes. They're on the fringes for sure.
Yeah.
So I mean, LA, but many cities other than just LA, right? Like I lived in Denver for a bit. I saw rampant homelessness in Denver as well. New York, of course, but I feel like New York has maybe marginally just done a better job, but it's it's kind of built into the infrastructure of New York at this point, right? Because of just different legislature and everything that's passed through.
That's right.
But in Los Angeles, many moons ago, I think Trump's when Trump got elected. I don't even at this point. I'm like, I don't even remember what year.
Past lifetime, yeah.
The pandemic has completely fogged my brain to where history lies. During that election, I remember there was a line of voting to help with the homelessness issue, and it's only grown. I think COVID gave a complete different cocktail of disaster, right? There's just so many things that came along with it, but. When you're pulling back and looking at the bigger picture, what are the different ways that the city and the county, and we'll get into that, right?
Sure.
And the state in general can be helping people who are on the street. Like, what programs exist for those people to opt into? Are they working right now? And I know this is all obviously tied to your platform. What exists to help the homeless at current?
Okay, so let me I want to make it very clear. Like, the root issue with the government's response to homelessness is that the purpose of the existing system is and only is to place people in housing. And right now, that housing or interim shelter does not exist. The most generous estimate you can come up with is that we're something between 35 and 25,000 units or shelter beds short compared to the 48,000 unsheltered people living on the streets of LA County.
But why?
Because we haven't built them. We haven't zoned for them in terms of permanent supportive housing, and it's very difficult to put to the financing. We'll talk about it. And shelter is similarly the kinds of shelter we've built have certainly not been hospitable during COVID because it's congregate and people don't feel safe in them, and we still haven't built enough of it. Even if we had, we don't have a bed to offer everybody on the street in good faith. And until we address that, we will be here. No matter what, because the system, when we talk about homelessness services, it's not like we have mobile, I mean, we do, but not at scale. It's not like we have mobile medical services, mobile mental health services, mobile social support services, mobile ID services. It's not like we have all of the social welfare state in vans that can go around and make sure that people who are living on the street have their basic health and identification and documentation needs met. We don't have any of that. The outreach teams go out, they put you in a database. If you're an industrious and mobile unhoused person, you can make it to an access center where they will give you a test or an evaluation that will rank you in terms of your mental health, physical health, and other kinds of needs. And then you'll be placed on a waiting list for housing. That's called the coordinated entry system, that list.
And how long could it take if you're on that list?
Years. We're waiting for a unit to open. And those units open only every so often. And, Section 8 vouchers, we got a bunch more of them from the Biden administration, but there was just an LA Times article a little bit ago that I don't know, we were given, I think 7,000 and something like 300 have been put into action. And it's because, it's difficult to, we're still in a housing crisis. It's not like there's like special, a lot of these are just normal apartments, right? We don't have.
And how does it work? Like, I'm not sure that many people actually understand like how that Section 8 piece actually can be plugged into different housing situations.
Right. So now you should for an expert, you should talk to what's called a matcher. So here's the way like the system works. There are outreach personnel, and those people work for nonprofits. Most of this work is done by nonprofits. Like the government does very little of this of the work itself. I mean, LAHSA, the Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority, is the contracting agent for. It gets money from the state and the feds and the county, and it writes contracts that then will be executed by nonprofits like the People Concern or the Center in Hollywood or the Weingart Foundation or you name it, a whole host. People Assisting the Homeless, PATH. Those contracts can be for a lot of different things. Some of it can be for outreach, to go out into the street, make sure you're finding people and putting them into the database. So there's teams that do that. And once you're in the database and you have been assessed in terms of your needs so that they can find they can put you on the list for an appropriate unit, a unit with either hopefully caseworker attached if you need it, or just if you don't need that, you just need a place to be, just a normal apartment someplace. And then your case is passed off to, or you start working with a housing matcher who is looking at, properties. Maybe they have connections with landlords, waiting for something to come open. And if it comes open and you're high on the list of the coordinated entry system, they'll say, okay, Joe, you got an apartment. Or maybe, okay, Joe, you have a place in a bridge home, like an interim shelter. A caseworker has to come back to you and tell you that. 40% of the time, that's why people don't end up in housing, because nobody came back to tell them a unit was available for them, either because
and there's no one monitoring that communication flow.
There's no, I mean, it's, as far as I'm aware, there's like 80 people monitoring that. There's 80 people monitoring parts of that communication flow.
But no one consistent.
There is no authority. No one is in charge.
Oof.
And so that is, again, that's actually why this has to be done at the state level, because we're so fragmented here. I mean, I'm running for a district with 4 cities in it. And like, I don't want to have to coordinate Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, and LA city councils. I want one policy that affects everybody so that these gaps are understood and can be fixed. But anyway, so a unit pops open, someone comes back to you and says, hey, Joe, we got to go today. Like, we got 12 hours to move you in today, perhaps. Or we got to go back and say, okay, Joe needs a bunch of documentation. Like, you need a birth certificate, an ID, maybe you need proof of work kind of things. Because the Section 8 voucher will pay for it won't pay for your security deposit, but so there are mechanisms if you're unhoused, I think, to pay for that money. But it will pay 30%. It will pay a significant portion of your rent. I believe it will make it so that you pay no more than a third of your income to rent. It'll cover the rest of the cost of the unit.
Oh my God! And it's also interesting because where are these units available? I mean, we're already in a housing crisis in general.
The way I talk about it, and we should get into the city and county split, but I'll just leave it at this, is like, so the city is largely responsible for the physical existence of, for example, shelters, or it has land use authority. So it's responsible for either building shelters or writing the zoning laws that enable permanent supportive housing to go up. And there's been some movement on there in the state level recently. But it can't assign you a psychiatrist. Like, the city has no control over mental health, public health, and health services. That's all at LA County. So LA City can come to you and say, hey, Joe, we got a unit for you. But the mental health needs that you'll need to stay in that unit have to be provided through county mechanisms. The county can say, hey, Joe, we have a psychiatrist for you, but it can't provide you a unit. And then, of course, if both of them are doing their jobs, what will happen is the city will give you a home in Northridge and the county will point you to a psychiatrist in Norwalk.
But how often does that actually happen?
Rarely.
I
mean, it might. I don't want to say rarely. Let me be fair to my government friends. Like, they're working very hard. The system is not structured to make this process efficient, and it's happening more than ever, but we know it's not happening enough.
And the numbers are so high that there's no way to catch up. According
to the LA Homeless Services Authority's most recent statistics, their total outreach numbers are such that they saw 1/3 of the unhoused population every other month for the first 6 months of last year, right? So, like, They were bragging about it. I think they made like 60,000 visits over the course of however long it was. And if you work it out, it meant that they saw a third of the unhoused people 3 times in that window, which is just not a good number.
That's not acceptable.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree.
So even more reason why we need to make some change and movement here. And I think you bring up kind of the heart of a little bit of the madness of living in Los Angeles, right? The city, the county. I had a friend recently who had voted a few months ago and was mentioning that there was no line for mayor. And she lives in Ladera Heights and started kind of digging in. She was like, Ladera was part of this whole kind of redistricting and or there was a complete, I can't remember the exact reason, but it was part of some move. And because of that, she could no longer vote for the mayor of LA.
She's in unincorporated LA County or something.
There, yeah. You know all the right terms. But I was just shocked to realize the difference there and just how kind of evil or just like unclear and messy the city and county line can be. So can you like bring us up to speed at a bit of that difference? And like for people who don't even understand
for sure
that difference, what it is.
Okay, so let's start at the top. LA County is the largest, by population, the largest county in the United States of America. It has a population of 10 million, which is like bigger than all but 14 states or something.
I always said the city was a county to me.
The city,
it's like it's basically a county. It's not a city.
Yeah. And in New York, for example, each borough is its own county. So the city is bigger than a county in New York. But in LA County is 10 million people. LA City is one of 88 cities in the county of Los Angeles. It's the biggest one. It's got 4 million people. But here are things that are not in the city. There are 5 cities inside the footprint of Los Angeles that are not part of the city of Los Angeles. Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, West Hollywood, Culver City, and San Fernando up in the valley. So those are, if you live, and I was in Santa Monica and people were excited to vote for Karen Bass. They didn't know, right? All that separates these are imaginary lines. In Hollywood, you go from the east side to the west side of La Brea Avenue, between Romaine and Fountain, you go from the city of Los Angeles to the city of West Hollywood.
I know, yeah.
I guarantee you, if you weren't a nerd like me and paying very close attention to the street signs, you would never know. Because all that happens is the street signs look different. I
realized during actually Pride that because there was 2 Prides this year, and that's when it was highlighted to me that West Hollywood is actually not.
West Hollywood is not part of Los Angeles. It doesn't even share the LAPD. It uses the sheriff's department. LAPD doesn't patrol West Hollywood. So the city of Los Angeles, if you look at it on a map, looks like a crazy thing because it's got this big blob at the top, and then it has this little dangling strip that follows the 110 south to San Pedro, and then it's got San Pedro. And this all stems back to the fact that I'm told LA needed access to water, so it needs the valley because that's where the California aqueduct runs down. It needed access to a port, which is why we have San Pedro and that little skinny thing connecting most of Metro LA to San Pedro down near Long Beach. And it needed access to an airport, which is why it goes out to the Pacific at El Segundo to get LAX. So, but embedded in it are these other cities that most people probably, yes, your ballots look different. Santa Monica didn't even have municipal elections in June. They have them in November. Same with West Hollywood. Beverly Hills did have a first round in, and so all of these cities have different things, different electoral offices, etc. And then there's a lot. Like in my neighborhood, you had on the ballot city council person, city controller, city attorney, mayor. You have county supervisor, which we'll talk about in a second. You have governor, state controller, and then state senate and state assembly, at least. There's probably more, plus the judges. So we ask a lot of the voter in Los Angeles. We don't ask enough of the citizen, but we ask a lot of the voter.
For sure.
And anyway, but the most important levels of government for local are your city council person, which in LA are the 15 city council people who each have jurisdictions of 250,000, which is huge. And then the 5 county supervisors who each have jurisdictions of 2 million people.
Which is a lot of people to overlook.
And nobody knows their names, and they are absolutely, after the governor and the attorney general, the 5 most powerful people in the state.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think people don't spend as much time thinking about the city council? I mean, I know that there's been some corruption issues in the past. I'm definitely moving back to LA. I was like, ooh, things are spicy here these days.
Well, one of the things I take the most hope in actually is I think in the city of Los Angeles, people now are paying attention to the city council. People have caught on to the fact that the city council, we talk about all politics being local. People have caught on to the fact that the city council controls where the rubber hits the road when it comes to your life and laws. That's all in the hands of the city council. And since 2020, the city council elections have been synced to the federal election schedule. So before last cycle, 2020, city council elections occurred in odd years. So 2017, 2019. And that was one of the major reasons why people weren't paying attention, because
unaware.
It's not on the same ballot. Now it is, and we've seen turnout go from 7,000 in a race to maybe last cycle. One of the challengers of an incumbent who won, Nithya Raman, had she won over 120,000 votes, I think,
which is so sad that there was such a difference there
before. Yeah, but the county supervisors, I think it's because when I first saw the word county supervisor, I was like, oh, that maybe they do like horse trails or like agriculture stuff or like water rights. I didn't realize they controlled the Department of Mental Health. They controlled the Department of Public Health. They control the Department of Health Services. They control EBT and social services. They control general relief checks. All of the social infrastructure are controlled by these 5 sort of queens. They're all women now, who most of us don't know the names of.
That is just insane. It's I'm just sitting here soaking it in a bit, because it is pretty mind blowing how people are so like keyed in on kind of like major elections, presidential, which yes, they matter.
Yeah,
we have now come to extremely realize how much they matter, but also, yeah, politics is local, and those people you should really take the time to research and read up the booklet that they send out to you, like get an understanding of their history, because the decisions that they're making are extremely important for the short and for the long term.
And another reason is it's all nonpartisan offices. They won't have a letter next to their name in terms of D or R or G or whatever. The city councils are explicitly nonpartisan, and I believe the county supervisors are as well. And the other reason why is because in terms of the partisan offices, this is something that I'm now grappling with. We are a one-party state, effectively, especially in Los Angeles. It's Democrats all the way up and all the way down. And so you'll frequently have races because of our primary system that's Democrat on Democrat in the general election. And this is something that at the federal level really never happens. And also voters are like, oh, I'm going to vote for the Democrat. And it's like, well, we're both Democrats. So, yeah.
We're both actually there. Oh, my God. Okay. I feel like you're giving us a real lesson today in LA politics and kind of the background. And honestly, like most people, again, living their lives, working in entertainment, working in music, which is like the world that I came from, just kind of cruising by, seeing the homeless person on the side of the road, but not really contextualizing that their vote can make the difference for that person's future. So that brings me to your future, right? So tell me a bit about your platform.
Okay, so I am running for state assembly, and I think it's worthwhile. I just said nobody knows what the supervisors do. Let's talk about
the assembly.
The state assembly, because a lot of people don't know what the state assembly does either. The state assembly is like Congress for California. So we all know that there's the House of Representatives and the Senate in D.C. We have the same thing in California. We have the state assembly, which is like our House of Representatives. There's 80 state assembly people. Each one of them serves 500,000 people. And then there's the state senate. There's 40 state senators, so each one of them serves 1 million people. And these folks go up to Sacramento, and they write the laws that affect each and every one of us all across the state of California. So any issue that crosses one of these imaginary lines I've talked about, any issue that is regional, that involves not just LA County, but LA County, Orange County, San Diego, any issue that involves really big pots of money like Medicaid, like getting from the Inflation Reduction Act, we're going to get a bunch of federal dollars for green energy stuff. That all goes through Sacramento. And so the legislator, it's exactly like DC. One house proposes bills. They go through their committee process. They get voted on by the other house. If they pass, they go to the governor. The governor signs it. State law. So all of our criminal justice laws come from the state. All of our like a lot of our tax incentives and stuff come from the state. Like there's a statewide tax break for movie studios so that we keep.
And who proposes them? Like who proposes what comes up?
The legislators or the people. I mean, if you got a good legislator, they'll come to you and in community forums be like, "Hey, we're taking bills now. So give us ideas. Give us ideas for bills so that we can put them forward by." They have a time limit to propose bills. But it will be my job. So I'm running to represent what's called the 51st District. It goes all the way from Santa Monica to Griffith Observatory. So I start at the Pacific Ocean. I have all of Santa Monica.
Spans half of LA.
Yeah, I have. It's every. What I like to say is when you hear the word California, you see something in 8051. We've got the Santa Monica beaches, Santa Monica Pier. We've got UCLA and Westwood. We've got Beverly Hills. We've got West Hollywood, which has a very vibrant, obviously, LGBTQ community. We've got the Miracle Mile, the Walk of Fame, the Hollywood sign, Griffith Observatory, Hollywood, East Hollywood, even a little bit of Los Feliz, and then all of the Hollywood Hills, from Franklin Canyon, like I say, all the way through to Griffith Park. So
nobody with money there at all, you know.
It is the most. It has out of 80 assembly districts, we rank number 5 in jobs, but more than half of those jobs pay less than $40,000 a year. And we have the same wealth inequality as Zambia in Africa. We are the most wealth unequal district in the state, 80 out of 80.
That's an insane stat.
It is insane. And it is my job as a legislator to represent everybody in that community, rich and poor, black or white, worker, business owner. And part of you asking your questions, why is it so hard to make legislation? When you have that kind of just socioeconomic diversity,
sure,
you're going to always have a fight. And it's my job as a leader to bring my ethical and moral and intellectual commitments to bear and do what I think is right as informed by all of this diverse constituency, and then go to Sacramento, make coalitions amongst legislators, get it through committee and pass it so that what I believe, so that everybody in my community is going to benefit.
Deep breath. So you're basically taking both multi-million-dollar actor, right, who owns a house in the hill.
Yeah,
the homeless, population, the business owners who are scrapping by, owning a small business, and then people who are transient or who have kind of like, people who are here for a quick time, but not necessarily here forever. You're taking the objectives and the needs and the wants and the morality of all these people and like what they see as fit and packaging it into this one piece to bring to the state, basically.
That's right. Because I believe that what happens in Santa Monica affects what happens in LA. What happens
Absolutely.
in LA affects what happens in West Hollywood. What happens in West Hollywood affects what happens in Beverly Hills. So I am the person who has to go and say, listen, I hear all your voices. I'm going to take that together and I'm going to go make sure that the entire state is working to make all of our places better so that good stuff doesn't stop at city lines. Good stuff. If a city has discovered some way to help thousands of people, it's my job to go to Sacramento and scale it so it's going to help millions of people.
So why should we vote for you? You
should vote for me because I will be the only scientist out of 120 state legislators.
I do like the way you think, I got to say. You've sold me on this.
Thank you.
The way you think is pretty analytical, but in a very logical way.
Thank you. So I think our leaders need vision, insight, and understanding. Vision means you have to have an idea of what something is supposed to do when it works. All of us know how much stuff is broken. All of us. We see it every day. We all know our homelessness response is broken. We all know our mental health care system is broken. We all know that. Our legislators have to have a vision for what they're supposed to do when they're working right. And I would say we have gotten to where we are because we have not elected people who could come to you and show you an actual picture of what LA is supposed to be when they're out of office. And I am working hard on that picture, but it's in my mind. And I have objectives. And I will go to Sacramento with intention to reach those objectives. Now, I also think we need elected officials, representatives with insight. We need people who aren't just going to say, this law sounds good enough. We need people with the training to critically assess the implications of their choices they're making. And because I'm a scientist, this is the background I have. I know, 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 I what a good solution is going to be in homelessness because I've analyzed the data myself on my computer. I ran a homeless count. I have done outreach to encampments. So like we need people who don't just take take a bill someone hands them and says, okay, good enough.
Execute. Yeah. You work to think of the whole picture, the holistic vision.
Exactly. And the third thing that they need is understanding. And I'm a renter. I live in a community that's 90% renters. I live in the part of my district that is that has the highest poverty rate. And the highest concentration of unhoused people. I have helped my neighbors get COVID rent relief. I have called hundreds of senior citizens and hand delivered them fruits and vegetables for 8 weeks back in COVID times, and now as part of a nonprofit until May when we were operating.
You're literally out in these streets.
And I've helped found coalitions that are bringing together these disparate voices. I'm on a nonprofit coalition called Hollywood Forward that is explicitly aimed at bringing the business community in touch with the service providers, to come to one consensus and empowered position on our homeless response in Hollywood. So that gives me the understanding to make sure that this vision that I've talked about is actually serving the people it needs to serve. And I think that that's an important asset to have in Sacramento, and I think I'm the person who checks those boxes in this race.
Well, absolutely. You're not just talking about it; you've actually done it.
Thank you. I've tried hard. I've tried hard.
The work never ends, for sure. The work never ends, but I love your passion for it.
Thank you.
Oh my God. I've like literally my mind is like racing in all kinds of different directions because I'm just thinking about, just how many people talk about making a change and how hard it is to really put yourself out there and the level of dedication, because I run a nonprofit as well. And people don't realize, like, I have the very regimented schedule because I need 2 hours to go make these calls and then make that email and then call up our financial advisor, but also spend time with the community. Like, it requires dedication. What keeps you dedicated? What keeps you motivated?
Fundamentally, it's the stories of the people that I've already told you, of the people who we've met and sometimes too rarely have had the great good fortune to actually help. So, before tough situations, I will remind myself that, like, that veteran who I mentioned, the Black trans woman who we helped, like, is a real person, and that there can be all of these shenanigans and talking points and political, optics and mass communications and all of that stuff is inevitable and it's part of campaigning. But at some point, there are real people who are really hurting, who really need help. And it's easy to lose sight of that, and I try not to lose sight of that, and I try to keep up. It's gotten harder as the campaign's gone on, but I kept doing the senior feeding in the beginning because I needed to stay connected to that population. I still do on and off outreach to unhoused people because it's important to stay grounded in the actual problem that we're going there to ultimately, hopefully, solve. And also, I'm an extrovert. Being in front of real people gives me a lot of energy.
Same.
The hardest parts of the campaign have been when we're alone, when it's either just me by myself. Like we can talk about the campaigning itself in the phases. I'm a grassroots candidate, first-time candidate, so I don't have a big money network. So it was just me at the beginning calling my friends and family, asking them to support this mission, and that was just me in my bedroom. I had to close the door because my girlfriend could not listen to me make these calls.
Not again.
So it was just me in my bedroom with a spreadsheet and a notepad. And then the campaign grew, and then by the time we were done with the primary, by the time we were hitting the primary, we were canvassing every single day, talking to people at their doors every single day, getting immediate feedback with other human beings. And that, to me, the last conversation I had on election day, on primary day, June 7th, was with a guy who I had canvassed before, and I coming back to him, and I opened the door and I said, hey, he hadn't handed in his ballot yet, according to our data. And I said, hey, I'm just coming back. You remember me? I knocked on your door. I'm Louis Abramson. I'm running to represent you. He goes, oh, yeah. My wife's going to vote for you. I'm voting for your opponent. And I got the biggest smile on my face because I was like, oh, okay. Well, can you tell me why? Can I ask why? He's like, yeah, I think I love what you're doing. I love your science background. I think your opponent checks these other boxes that mean a lot to me. I was like, hey, you know what? Totally understand it. Thank you for being a voter. After the primary, I'll call you and we'll go sit down and have a cup of coffee, and I can tell you a little bit more about what I'm trying to do. And I intend to follow through on that. But
you're gonna win him over. Well,
but even if I don't, the point is that so much in our daily existence exists to tear us apart, intentionally or not. The example I use is Netflix. Nothing against Netflix. I have Netflix. I love Netflix. But if Netflix's business model was operating optimally, they would have an infinite amount of content such that me and my girlfriend, or you and your husband, who probably have infinitesimal differences in watching preferences, would never see the same TV show. Your feeds would look completely different because their algorithm keyed off that, like, you like the color pink and he likes the color, I don't know, like mauve. And so
It's a very, very distinctive.
and so therefore you're never going to see the same stream, right? We don't go to the movies anymore. We can't now, but like we don't go to the movies anymore. The social sphere, the parts of our existence that remind us that, hey, we're in this together. There's just a lot of headwind to that now. Not to say nothing of the pandemic. Just, social spaces have become smaller.
It's changed completely. And the way that you approach life and the way that we interact and the cadence which we interact is completely changed.
And we have to rebuild that. And politics at its best does that. We canvass not just because it's good politics. We canvass to remind people that they're not alone and that strangers understand your frustration and share them and want to do something about them. So that keeps me going. Canvassing is the best part of this. I will say, I know I've droned on, but I will say one last thing. When I was in
hand to hand.
When I was in prep for this, one of my friends from the Katie Hill campaign, I called him. He's a professional campaign, professional. And I said, I love canvassing, but I'm not sure I'm really looking forward to doing it. And he said, Lou, by the time you're canvassing, it's going to be a treat. Like you're not gonna want to stop. And he was so right. Like it's just being out there talking to someone, even when they disagree with you. There's something about that person to person. You and I are here right now, and we're gonna leave. Maybe not as I may not have earned your vote, but I'm not gonna leave as your enemy. That is just very important.
And you're really knowing the constituency, right? Like you're actually in the trenches with them. Oh my God, I'm hoping you get elected.
Thank you.
And
Zeena.
I am
Me
an
too.
LA City person. My God, thank you. I feel like there's so much to dissect there, so many things to think about. And I think that, in this interview, one of the most important things you've done is broken down in a very succinct way, in a very tangible way, some very complex processes that really affect most citizens, especially the citizens of LA County and city, every single day. So thank you so much for taking the time to really dig into that. Before we go though,
sure,
I have a quick this or that.
Okay.
And I was let's get a little color of Louis' life.
Right? Okay.
Music or movies?
Oh. I'm gonna say movies now. Didn't used to be that way. It's changed as I've gotten older, but movies.
I'm gonna say music because I'm a music head no matter what. Dodger dog or street taco?
Street taco.
Good call. The Dodger dogs, they smell so good, but when you eat them, you're like, ugh.
My grandma was a Dodgers fan. My grandma was brought up in Brooklyn, and my grandpa was from the Bronx.
Because they moved, yeah.
Well, no, my grandpa used to take the train all the way from the Bronx to my grandma's, and they would go to Coney Island. So he would always take the train all the way back from Coney Island to the Bronx, which is a long way in New York.
Hell yeah.
And anyway, one of their biggest disagreements was Dodgers when it was in Brooklyn versus Yankees, obviously, and then when the Dodgers went to LA, it made it a little easier for them. So I'm obviously a Dodgers fan, but yeah, street tacos.
But yeah, the dog doesn't.
It's not good.
Doesn't get the shot. Yeah. School or learning in real life?
Learning in real life. I have been in school my entire life, but getting out of it has been one of the most enriching and empowering things I have done, and I intend to do it for the rest of my life. So learning in real life, although I love school, and if you're in school now, do as much as you can because it will help if you want to run for office.
Oh, I am the worst school person. I've thought about getting my MBA so many times and I'm like, no. I'd rather just learn in real life. I've done pretty well learning in real life actually, but one day I'll get more academic. Okay, last one is the LA question. Beach or the pool?
Beach.
Easy.
I'm going there next. If you're in Santa Monica, I'll see you soon.
And that's why you should vote for him, because the beach is the best place on earth. Louis, I just want to thank you so much. This has been such a treat to actually hear from you and your perspective, and best of luck in the election. I feel like you've got a pretty good chance.
Thank you, Zeena. I'm going to take just a moment to shamelessly plug.
Go for it.
If you like what you heard today and you're keen to help out with my campaign, you can go to louisforca.com. That's LOUISFORCA.com. If you are one of those people who feeds off the energy of other people, we are going to be canvassing every weekend starting August 20th, which is very soon. That's going to ramp up, obviously, as we head towards November. You can do that. Just sign up at volunteer on the website. And also, of course, we're always hustling like you're always hustling as a nonprofit leader. Change takes change. So if you've got some spare change, you can always throw it our way at our website as well. And obviously, we'd very much appreciate it. So thank you so much, everybody. Thank you,
I'll give
Zeena.
all those links so that people can just
please,
get through
please,
it.
please. And anytime. I was thrilled. I hope it wasn't too long-winded. I'm thrilled to talk about this. I'd love to come back anytime. Certainly when the race is over to debrief.
Yes, please.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zeena.